Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all safe and healthy. I'm Wee Shong, Academic Director of the NUS Global Relations Office. Welcome to this online seminar on sharing good practices, teaching practices. How have we coped in the pandemic? Thank you all for attending. This webinar is organized by the NUS Global Relations Office together with the NUS Center for Development of Teaching and Learning, CDTL. Today we are honored to have a panel of experts from NUS and two of our partner universities in ASEAN, University Brunei Darussalam and Chulalongkorn University. The panel will share with us some good teaching practices, such as redesign the teaching materials or tasks, how to engage and ensure students' attention when we teach online, and what are some challenges encountered by students that we should anticipate and assist with. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Lee Kuei Cheng, Deputy Director of CDTL, to chair the seminar. Kuei Cheng, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Wee Shong. Good afternoon, everyone. As Wee Shong shared earlier, our topic today is good teaching practices with a focus on how we have all coped and we are still coping during this pandemic. At this webinar this afternoon, there are three things that we hope to accomplish. Although it's only 1.5 hours, we hope that we can accomplish these three things. First, our panelists, who are very good teachers, will share with us concrete examples that will give us more ideas on how we could try and incorporate what they have done and into our own context. Second, as much as this platform and time allow, we would like this to be a dialogue with the participants. That is all of you. So we encourage everyone to share your queries, your questions, any suggestions you may have, your comments, and especially good ideas on the Zoom Q&A. Thank you to those who have already sent in your queries and comments to us prior to this webinar. And third, we hope that this particular webinar will start a conversation, this is not the end, this is just the beginning of the conversation. And so please do check out our CDTL's Teaching Connections, as well as follow us on our Facebook so that you could contribute and you could share your good ideas with us. So what are good teaching practices? To help us frame this afternoon's webinar, we use Chickering and Gamson's 7 broad principles, as you can see on the slide here. And they include encouraging contacts between students and faculties, developing cooperation among students, using active learning techniques, giving prompt feedback, emphasizing time on task, communicating expectations to our students, and respecting diversity and also ways of learning. So in today's session, each of our panelists will share concrete examples of what they have learned in the past few months, how they have managed, and how they have reshaped their curriculum, their materials, tasks, activities, or assessments. So our first panelist, Dr. Abel Young, from NUS, will share how he redesigned his materials and tasks involving fieldwork. And then Dr. Annie from University of Brunei Darussalam will present a concrete example in which she engages her students and retains their attention. This is followed by Jess from Chulalongkorn University, who will talk about how he and his colleagues redesigned their curriculum so that they could address challenges encountered by the students. So before I invite Abel to share, let me briefly explain what the program is like. So after each panelist has done their sharing, we will have a very short Q&A session, focusing on the topic or issue that is surfaced by that panelist. After everyone or every of the panelists has shared, has given their sharing, I will come back and I will do a recap, and then each of the panelists will share with us a take-home message, and I'll pass the time back to Richon, who will close the session. So may I now invite Abel to start his sharing. Abel, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abel. I am a lecturer in the Department of Physics in NUS. Next slide, please. Okay, so a bit of background about what I teach. I teach an introductory class on practical astronomy. So that actually involves group stargazing sessions where students would bring out telescopes to the NUS field, and effectively they would entertain the crowd. Okay, that's something like 200 odd people on the field. And at the same time, together with the class, there's also a field trip where students would go to, we would bring everyone to a dark site in a dark site nearby. Unfortunately, in Singapore, that dark site nearby has to be in Malaysia. So that's crossing an international border. And they would do more complicated things like astrophotography. Now, as you can imagine, this is a very hands-on class, and there's also an in-person hands-on session with equipment and safety briefing and everything. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so of course, we all know that COVID-19 turned this all upside down. Next slide, please. Okay, so what happened? Well, by the time COVID-19 got to Singapore, we were well into the second semester of the 2019-2020 academic year. So just before lockdown. And what happened then? We had already conducted the telescope setup hands-on session. So the students had that safety briefing already. And unfortunately, that also meant that COVID-19 meant that we had to cancel the field trip, unfortunately. We couldn't pass the risk assessment, although the border between Singapore and Malaysia was still open then. Okay, so what we did, we pretty much set the students out on their own. Now, the structure of the class is that students would work in groups based on logistical constraints. We don't have enough telescopes to go around for the entire class, so they'd have to share. And then in this current semester, which just started 3 weeks ago, we've been forced to go into e-learning to minimize the on-campus population. And of course, our main challenge was how to conduct these hands-on activities without face-to-face contact. Right, so next slide. Okay, so the problem with that, our large local field observing sessions involved like 200 people, and we had a few options that tossed out. I considered canceling the class, which, given the unprecedented situation we're in, seemed mildly reasonable. We could have canceled the observing sessions, just mitigate that risk, could reduce class size so that we could have more equipment, less students and more opportunities for equipment. And of course, we could do what we did the last semester and set students loose with individual observing sessions. Now, one advantage that we had was that these stargazing sessions are deliberately open-ended, because you go out there in the field at night, you're trying to look at the stars, but you have to deal with the weather, and you don't know what the weather will throw at you, because it may be raining, it may be cloudy, so we can't be too structured. So of course, what did we do then? Well, next slide. We have to consider our learning goals. Okay, so what do we want? What do we really want to achieve? Okay, so first of all, COVID-19, everyone knows this is no longer business as usual. And the big question is, how do we reformulate these activities that can keep the learning goals? And in my case here, what I did was to go back to the reason why we have these activities, these stargazing activities, in that the class model, the teaching model that I've been using is experiential and authentic learning. In other words, these hands-on activities actually reinforce in-class concepts. So I would introduce something a bit more complicated in class, but the hands-on activities would be there to really just reinforce what's going on. And removing these activities, well, that would be a very big loss. So two options. Can we supply students with equipment? And what can we do without access to equipment? Next slide, please. Well, within the physics department, we've had different approaches. One of which is to send each student equipment. Okay, so that's what some of my colleagues have done, in that for the first year introductory physics classes, they would send each student a small box of experimental apparatus, and they would put these together and conduct everything online on their own with online guidance. But in my class, well, we can't do it because telescopes are a bit more expensive and complicated, and students would still need to learn how to use the equipment. So the approach I've taken would be to simply use no special equipment. Right? Two sources of inspiration here. One is to consider how ancient astronomers work. They did it entirely with just their eyes, no technology, just record the sky. The other was that previous years we had a project component where groups come up with a hands-on activity, and they would make models of the solar system from recycled materials. A lot of them did that. So it would be a bonus if we can design these alternative activities without special equipment, and especially so if we can deliver them online. All right, so what are some of our assumptions? Okay. Well, we assume that students can see the sky, all right? And in Singapore, it's a reasonable assumption that students would have a smartphone with a camera or a standalone camera. So our challenge then is to use only everyday items, make it simple enough to be done without any physical assistance. So students may still ask for assistance, but that would be by online chat or video call. And we need it to be appropriate for the level. Okay, so effectively, creativity within logistical constraints. If my students can be creative when doing their projects, I think I should at least also do that. Okay, so next slide. Next slide will show you the before and after. So the left two pictures, you see students out in a field trip, telescopes, working in groups, out at night, complicated equipment with hands-on training beforehand. And of course, the picture they get at the bottom left, that's quite nice. Okay, on the top right, that's our after. What I've done is to put a phone camera in just prop up a phone in a bowl. I'm not even assuming that students have a selfie stick or anything, but I'm assuming that students would at least have a bowl and just take pictures of the night sky. And of course, that's what you get in the bottom right is what you see in Singapore. A lot of light pollution, but you can make out a few stars there. And I think that's good enough given our constraints. Okay, so you may be thinking, okay, why even bother, right? Well, in a lot of this, in doing this, one of my key goals is the process rather than the final product. So if you go to the next slide, some of our considerations here is that, does this activity contribute to our learning goals? Okay, and in this case, it does, in that it introduces students to how astronomical data is collected. So, well, that was one of the successes. Some activities, however, didn't quite work out. in that they look like a good idea when I first thought of it, but when you actually really write it out, it doesn't look too appropriate because it's just too simple. There were also others which were a bit more complicated, and I just simplified it. And of course, all of this needs to be attempted first. All right, so I tried it out, and of course, the goal is to anticipate as many problems as possible. All right, so that's my brief sharing. I'm going to take some questions. Okay, so the questions that were submitted, I've got a couple of them here. All right, first of all is how do we redesign courses that need hands-on practice via online? Okay, so one of this is, one of the considerations here is that I would think, well, first think of how the pioneers of your field worked. When I say pioneers of your field, I mean the people who would start things off and they had very little resources and apparatus. How did they work? That would be a nice starting point. And you may realize that from that starting point, together with our learning goals, there may be at least some sort of compromise in which you can come up with some activities. And of course, a lot of this comes down to your own creativity. Now, the other question, what about laboratory sessions for science courses?
Maybe we can interrupt for a while, Abel.
Oh, yes.
The other panelists might have any response to the first question.
Oh, yeah.
And Annie, would you have any insights to share with us?
Not at the moment, Wishong. Thank you.
Jess?
Okay. Oh, actually, I can explain, maybe answer this question in my session as well. But at this point, Abel, you can share your experience. Thank you.
Yeah. So basically, in my case, it was inspiration from the ancient astronomers. Okay. So ancient astronomers just looked at the sky. They recorded what they saw. They didn't understand what they saw. When ancient, I mean, ancient Chinese, ancient Babylonians, that sort. They would really record the sky every night. And of course, I still see value in that because it connects the real world to students. Okay, so in some cases, it may not be practical and we would have to fall back to theory. In other cases, it may actually add value in that students would see the context in which certain fields of study were developed in. Okay, now the other question is, what about laboratory sessions for science courses? Okay, in that, well, suppose, well, in a traditional laboratory session, students would come to the lab, the apparatus would be there, they would do some setup, and they would basically go perform the experiment and write the report. Now, one of the approaches that my colleagues in the physics department have taken is that they would basically mail out a box of simple apparatus. So things like basic things like, rubber bands, simple lenses, stuff in which they can make their own apparatus together with simple household items. And then there would be a guided handout and maybe online guidance in which they could do this, in which they would perform the lab all at home. So think, home science kits sort of thing. Okay, now,
Abel, may I
yes.
just also interrupt here for a while? Since
Okay.
you are the only panelist here who is from STEM, the following question that is posed by one of the participants is, in relation to your module earlier, how did you assess your students?
So how do I assess? Okay, so I see in the Q&A there's two questions on assessment. How did you do formative and summative assessment for your classes? And do we also adjust our assessment, especially for the learning experience? Okay, so what's happening here? The assessment that the usual deliverables that I do, it's not just for astrophotography, for example, it's not just photo, there's also a write-up together with it, talking about their experience, the description of what's going on, and effectively there's also quite a fair bit of back-end processing that goes on with it, in that they would take the pictures and then they download the pictures into a laptop and process from there. So all of this, they can do it on their own. And for astrophotography, I see there's actually no change in the assessment. If anything, I would expect them to talk about the experience doing it on their own. For the others, for other assessments, one of them, well, the part on sidewalk astronomy where they would entertain the crowd, I think that clearly has to go. But what I would substitute it with is perhaps another, I gave them the option of doing another one of the astrophotography assignments. Basically do the same thing on a different target. That's one option. Another option is that they would process a picture taken from an astronomical archives. So there are large public archives of scientific imaging done for astronomy, and they would just take that, download it. Those are publicly available. They would download it, do their processing, and submit it. And I actually have that in regular years as a sort of backup in case we lose all our stargazing opportunities to bad weather. So pretty much no change. But adjusting assessment really is a case-by-case basis. Okay.
Okay. Yes. Any of the panelists have got any responses to this question about, assessing students, whether after you've redesigned or reshaped your materials or your tasks or your assignments, has your assessment been affected? Yes.
Well, actually, I look at the question posted by our audience, and actually, some of them also asked about formative and summative evaluation. And actually, well, in my case, I will also present my experience that I changed the curriculum and the way that I evaluate from rather than focusing on summative to be in terms of formative evaluation. So I will show my presentation and we can have more discussion about this later.
Okay, so maybe we move on to Charlton. We move on to one live question that was asked on the Q&A. Would you be able to help show us that? Yes, this is one of the questions that was asked on the live Q&A. What would your advice to educators and learners from a developing country who have limited access to internet and gadgets on how to go about distance learning during a pandemic? So I think Abel, in his description earlier, in his sharing of his astronomy class, attempted to, I think, answer part of this particular question. I think the gist is basically that looking at our learning outcomes, how can we make use of what is available to us as well as what is available to our students, and creatively think of how we can go about helping our students learn in that particular context, especially in countries where accessibility is an issue or is a problem. But I see that maybe Annie or Jess might want to answer that. Annie, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it really depends based on this question. If you're talking about inclusivity, of course, including all learners and limited access. So it really depends on the courses that you run, depends on the students as well. I remember from my experience as a parent that is completely different, but the teacher actually has no means because of the students' variety in terms of diverse accessibility or connectivity ability. So the teacher actually use, in fact, we can use as simple as our mobile phone and then social media using WhatsApp, and how we can organize the lectures or the lessons focusing on the learning goals, of course, is by using KinMaster, like a tool that I know is very much useful, like KinMaster, where you can develop even less than 2 minutes of video, and you can use this to upload it on their WhatsApp, and students can interact directly. Well, then that again depends if students have access to mobile phones, but otherwise it can always be recorded and then shared to the students for future references or for later or scheduled time.
Okay, thank you, Annie. I think we are running short of time in this section of Q&A, so I thought that leads very well into Annie's session to talk about attention and gaining our students' attention and retaining our students' attention so that learning later on takes place.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing great and feeling good. So greetings from Brunei. I'm Annie from the Center for Lifelong Learning, University Brunei Darussalam, and I'm happy to share with you today our experiences in terms of engaging students and enhancing their attention, particularly in the virtual world, of course. And so which learning approach did we adopt? At the Center for Lifelong Learning, UBD, we have adopted actually both a synchronous as well as synchronous learning approach, because we deliver modules or courses using blended approach. Thus, we have been utilizing pre-recorded or self-paced lectures. During the pandemic, we also have moved to utilizing live lectures or real-time sessions. Now, if you ask me which is better, well, both definitely has its own pros and cons, but preparation is definitely key to enhancing the students' engagement as well as their attention. So first of all, next slide, which platform or learning platform do we use? The next one, Charlton, thank you, at UBD. So for the purpose of managing our classes, managing our students, their attendance, their registrations, their learning materials, at UBD we use Canvas. Other tools actually are equally good as well. Probably, I'm sure you've heard of Google Classroom, Edmodo, as well as Moodle. What about in terms of delivering our presentation? How can we, for example, increase the students' engagement, their attention? Can we actually achieve that? Yes, but how? It involves definitely good visuals and editing, but bear in mind as well, it can involve a lot of editing. So normally we use PowerPoint with simple use of animations, some good images, interactive medias, either pre-recorded live sessions. We can also use Google Slides. I personally love to use Canva, and that's what I'm using for my presentation today. They provide free images, really good professional ones too. Then there's also Prezi, very interactive software or tools. There's also ThinkLink, where you can use just one image, using just one image or slide, and embed additional images, additional slides, even videos or audios, in fact, text as well as hyperlinks. So it's really interesting. And quizzes, of course, you can use for students to engage them more, and also for retention purposes, of course. Now, how about tools for recording your pre-recorded or self-paced lecture. I mean, does it really matter when it comes to engagement and attention span? Yes, because based on our experiences, again, at the C3L, prior to the pandemic, we have been using DSLR cameras for our lectures recording and then editing them via softwares like iMovies, Adobe Premiere, even Camtasia. Using Canvas Studio, in fact, we can also encourage students' participation by allowing them to ask questions at the very minute that they don't understand in the video itself or a pre-recorded video. So Screencastify, as you can see here, is also very awesome. It's easy to download. In fact, it's just an extension of Google Chrome. And once you download it, you're all set and good to go. And if you need to deliver your courses that's more technical, involving calculations or similar like maths, for example, you can use Zipboard. Now, how about live or real-time sessions? At UBD, we normally use Big Blue Button, that is via Canvas, of course. So here at BBB, as I call it, students can share notes that's downloadable for their future references, even for our marking purposes and giving feedbacks, which are all crucial, we believe, for student engagement or retention. And in Big Blue Button, it also allows group or breakout discussions. It's unlimited in terms of usage, and we can also record the live sessions. Of course, there are other great tools such as Zoom, as we are using now, Google Meet, as well as Adobe Connect, which are all available as alternatives, and it's very much worth exploring. Now, the crucial bit for enhancing students' engagement as well as retention, of course, is how you run the sessions to be more participative, more exciting. Now, at the center for both pre-recorded and live sessions, for our adult learners or working professionals, we use digital portfolio. So here, students are given a dedicated or a scheduled time following their pace to submit their reflective report, which we have also actually integrated as our primary formative assessment and in providing feedbacks. But of course, next slide, with all the tools available, I think I'm faster than my slide. Next slide. But of course, with all the tools available, for it to work and for the benefit of a consistent learner experience, proper planning or strategies have to be put in place. Firstly, for example, set up netiquettes, good practices for online sessions, like live online lectures, for example. Tell the students what they have to do during, before, and even after the online session. Things like be on time, mute your mic, be respectful of with each other. And then for pre-recorded videos, provide 2 minutes or less introductory video. Introduce yourself, the module, what are the expectations. And in order to increase the student attention span, we try as much as possible and chunk your lecture. Try to provide bite-sized ones. How can we do that? You can divide your contents into study objectives, or as Dr. Abel mentioned earlier, in terms of learning goals, focus on the learning goals or learning objectives. So again, how do we ensure engagement or retention? We use themes, use media, animations, nice images. Students love real life stories or applications for their reflective practice, of course. And what we can do is provide scripts along with the videos, which can be treated like an expanded version of your videos. So again, to increase engagement and attention span, focus on your visuals, like things like fonts, like colors. More importantly as well is to be as natural as possible, use personable tone, sound more welcoming. Don't be too conscious. It's okay sometimes not to be okay. So just be yourself and practice if you wish. Curiosity here often works well too when it comes to attention or retention purposes. For example, the 2 pictures here I would actually use to ask the students question. This is a topic on human resource, and it's talking about how the first picture, person fit, is as important as a job fit when it comes to applying for an organizational recruitment. And also this baby here, as you can see, is to do with self-control or self-discipline. So I'm quite sure most of you have tried this. If you haven't, you'll be surprised at how engaging the students can be. Now, the key is to get the students engaged, of course, via discussions or forums online, scheduled or live, it will work. Use polls, use quizzes with those awesome tools, as I mentioned earlier, like quizzes, Nearpods. Padlet is also awesome. It's an online or virtual space where students can actually collaborate like in one community. And then be prepared technically, connection-wise. I mean, that's crucial as well. What's your contingencies? Invest a little bit, perhaps for some good audio equipment, if you wish. Learn new skills like editing or new tools for teaching and learning. There's dozens out there. So lastly, respect privacy. Sometimes we have to also consider, I mean, in terms of students' privacy, again, we can't expect too much. It depends on the connectivity issues as well as the privacy when it comes to sharing their webcams. And in terms of pre-recorded videos, we try to use watermark, and this is to prevent issues like, you know, misuse or copyrighted issues. Do also consider the platform that you use or the tools you adopt in terms of security wise. I mean, look at how you share the information or how information are being used, shared and protected. So that's all for me. And in terms of the questions, I have here question one, something about student engagement in the offline learning. So as mentioned earlier, there's a number of tools that's available that offers activities for increasing our student engagement. Again, depending on your modules, of course, you can dedicate a scheduled time, give them a period for them to do the activities, not too long, not too short as well. Give them that pathway of flexibility. So at C3L, we again highlight, I mean, we use digital portfolios or e-portfolios that is for their formative assessment using reflective practice. And we can use Padlet for an open space discussion forum, Tingling for interactive presentations. But more importantly, we as educators should try our very best really to take responsibility, you know, have that intention to create a student-centered learning, more importantly, a consistent learner experience in terms of navigation-wise, structure, as well as pathways. Try to focus on the transitions in terms of the navigations. And that's how, inshallah, we can maximize students' participation and engagement as well as their retention. Question two, how do we encourage students to attend online classes instead of reviewing recorded lectures? Well, definitely more interactions can be achieved in real time with questions getting answered instantly. Feedback can be given or provided immediately as well. So you can use appropriate tools like Padlet, quizzes, again, Nearpods or Zipboard. The social connections or interactions can be better with these tools. You can assess them, maybe even provide incentives like point system from my experience for accumulated credits, obtain feedbacks. If maybe you can also carry out research or get their feedback, students' feedback, whether or not if they enjoy online more or recorded version. We can always try to motivate them via a more personalized learning experience. So the other question, I suppose, yeah?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, for sharing some of your thoughts here, as well as
Okay.
earlier some of the very useful tips on how we might be able to engage our students' attention and then to, retain engagement as well. Maybe I'll just ask whether Abel and Jess, whether they would have any suggestions here to these questions, and also to our participants out there. If you have very good ideas, would you also please share at the Q&A, that Zoom Q&A, on the Zoom Q&A. Thank you. Jess and Abel.
Okay, on the second question, one of the things that I've done is to have an online flipped classroom. So we would have a recorded lecture, and then students would come in online for synchronous discussion. And I believe Jess also does flipped classroom as well. One of the things here is that having breakout rooms would be very useful, and in that I would post the discussion questions, and then students would go into the breakout rooms, and I would my TA and myself would go into the rooms and basically contribute to the discussion as well. What I've also done is what I'm also doing is that I use Microsoft Teams, which has collaborative features in there, so they would have a common document that they can work on at the same time. And because they're in the same team, I would have access to the document, I would see what they're doing, and I can comment on the document that they're working on as well. So there's that sort of interactivity, and that would actually add value to an online class in addition to just watching recorded lectures.
Okay,
Just
actually, same with Abel, I use Flip Classroom as well and make the content on the classroom offline, online, go hands in hand, go together and support each other. So the way that I did, just like what Abel already mentioned, but in my case, we normally use Blackboard, the program, the platform called Blackboard. And I myself also use Google Classroom, for example. So we, as I told you, the students need to study first offline. So we hang video clips, or we share the readings on Google Classroom or Blackboard before we're gonna have the synchronous session for online. And it's more into like discussion and consultation. So students need to pre-study. They have to read the reading or watch the video clip before we have online classroom. So this is the answer for the both question. So this is how we ensure the offline learning. They have to study by themselves first, because if they don't study by themselves offline, they won't understand what we're going to talk online. And it supplement each other. So they have to be online, because we're going to have more discussion and we're going to have more clarification for them. So this is what, how to say, like, this is kind of like the strategy that we encourage the students to be active offline and online.
Yeah, Madam Chair, can I add?
Sure.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I do agree with Abel, both Abel and Jess as well, when it's referring to flipped classroom, where you give them the video first, or you give them the recorded videos first, and then discussions after. It can also work the other way around. Sometimes, from my experience, again, from our experience at UWD, we can also go the other way around. In other words, we give them the live lecture first, or pre-recorded lecture, and then we come live for the discussion. Because sometimes when you get students, I mean, not all students, I mean, some students, if you ask them to do it, they won't do it, they won't read it, they will come empty-handed. So usually what I like to do is to get them to go through the notes first. We discuss about it live or pre-recorded, and then we come back and sit and reflect on it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll take one live question, Talcott, the one that I think you've put on the slide. So that's one of the live questions. What tasks or activities do you suggest to minimize screen time of students while keeping them engaged to learning the topic or material?
Okay, in terms of minimizing screen time, I think there's also a relationship between minimizing screen time as well as attention span. On average, I mean, based on based on a research from Microsoft 2 years ago, attention span of an adult, based on their survey, is deteriorating every year. Now, on average, a person's attention span is 8 seconds. So yes, if we're talking about what task activities do you suggest to minimize screen time, to increase or maximize attention span, then we can use those things like, as I mentioned earlier, like Padlets, like particularly Tingling. Do check out Tingling. And it provides actually a virtual space where students can collaborate, can discuss, pose questions, you provide feedback, even assess them. And like I said, Tingling, you can definitely just use one image, and under that particular image itself, you can embed all sorts of things, from your questionnaires to your quizzes to your whatsoever. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Abel? or Jess?
Well, based on this, I would say a hands-on activity that's off screen. So something to do that's not on screen, but it's very hard to deliver in that you would give it out to this, you would hand out, distribute the activity, post the activity, and you don't know whether students actually do it or not. And I think at some point here, the usual way to say it is this will be on the test and students would do it, but I think we shouldn't be relying on that.
Yep,
Uh,
definitely.
and I don't have any good recommendations, although if the students are certainly motivated, then that would definitely make a very big
Yes,
difference.
that's true.
Okay, can I add something shortly? In my case, I rather do something very simple, just like what Abel already mentioned. So actually simple is the main keyword. So if we ask them to do something, I would like to ask them to do something very easy and very simple, like something that fit into their daily life. I don't want to give more burden on them. For example, like there's one particular class, um, to think about the effect of mass media on their life, on people's life. So what I assign, I assign them to how to say, like make the memo and the diary of their daily life, like what kind of media they consume and what kind of reaction, what kind of feeling that they have, and then make it. Maybe they can just write it on a paper, and then they just like take a photo and send it to me.
Yes.
So when we think about any assignment, simple, just like Abel mentioned, is a keyword and something that they can easily follow and easily do it adopt it into their daily life. So this is my experience.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Maybe before we move to Jess's sharing, there was a request to take a look quickly at Annie's slide on group interaction. Charlton, do we have that slide? When you talk about Annie, when you talk about interaction, yeah. Which slide could you please let us know? Because the one of the participants said that she would really like to take a look at that slide.
The live interactions, I think it's this slide.
The group interaction.
I have live interactions here, particularly if you're considering having synchronous learning. So is it in terms of the tools?
Could we go to the next one, please? Yeah, I think probably this is the one that I think the participant was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe we could then move on to Jess's sharing. I think it's a very interesting sharing because Jess comes from the perspective that he actually he and his colleagues actually considered what are some of the difficulties and challenges faced by their students in their context, and then they redesign their curriculum. So I pass the time over to Jess, who's gonna share with us in about 10 minutes how they did it and some of the challenges, of course, that were faced by his students.
Okay, so I'm Jess. You can call me Jess. My full name is Jesada Saratong. I'm from the Faculty of Communication Arts, Chulalongkorn University, and until last June, I served as the assistant to the president for international affairs at Chulalongkorn University. And now I would like to share my experience on how to teach of the pandemic that we are facing right now. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, so to give you an idea about our university, Chulalongkorn University, it is located in the downtown, in the city center of Bangkok, just like the previous picture that you saw. Although our location is located in Bangkok, in the middle of Bangkok, but actually we cannot just simply think that all the students can have access to the Wi-Fi. This is the problem that many participants already mentioned in the context of developing countries, because our students are from many parts of Thailand. I experienced it. One of my students, they went back home to a quite far remote area of Thailand, and they said that internet access was a big problem for him. So we have to take all these things into our consideration. And just like what Abel mentioned, our university also faced the same situation. Our university had an announcement on instructional management. And as you can see that in conclusion for the courses that focus on theoretical or seminar courses, let's say it's more into lecture based, the lecturers are encouraged to place more emphasis and concentration on online instruction. And for lab, for practical courses, the instructors are encouraged to use blended learning instruction. So actually the situation is rather same in Singapore and in many countries. But as I told you that some of my students, they went back home to their hometown, and we cannot like simply think that all of them can access to Wi-Fi, because Thailand is unlike Singapore, unlike Brunei, that not all the area are covered by high-speed internet. Okay, so that's a big challenge, and we have to think about this, to take this kind of thing into our consideration. Okay, next slide, please. And as I told you that I'm teaching communication arts, and teaching communication arts is also involved with labs as well, because we have radio production, we have TV production, or even my classes, some of my classes also involved in how to be MC, how to be news anchor. So we actually need the student to come to the studio in order to practice how to be the MC or news anchor in front of camera. So if you look at the challenges that we face, the first one, no unity. What does it mean? Although university encouraged that you have to put all the lecture-based classes to online basis, but as you can see that some courses which is focused more onto practice-based, these kind of courses, what can we do and how many percentage? There is no one single rule in order to make a judgment on this. So kind of like it's quite subjective. Okay, and next one, in order to teach online, the lecturers also need to have skills, need to have some preparedness in order to teach online as well. So the problem is, do all the lecturers in our university are ready to go online? So that's the problem from the lecturer side. And for the student side, we also have a problem with access. As I told you that we cannot think that 100% of our students can get their high-speed internet. So they're going to be the access and connectivity problem as well. And next one, class design. So as already mentioned that there are the gap between the class that go on for lecture based and the practice based. So how can we think about the design of all the classes? Evaluation and plagiarism and cheating. Actually, I got a chance to join the first webinar by NUS, and last time I remember that the biggest question that everyone asks is, how can we make sure that the student not going to cheat? So how can we avoid the plagiarism? The answer is no way. We cannot avoid the cheating, or we cannot avoid the plagiarism if the student want to do. So this is a big challenge that we have to face and think about. Okay, and I would like to show you some, share with you some solutions and some choices. Next slide, please. Okay, so the choices, the first one, well, if we want the students to engage, actually Annie and Abel already share their idea that how can we make our classes fun and active. Okay, like Annie, she's guru, she has a list of the tools that you can pick up. I noted some of them and try to use after this as well. But in my class, because I'm from media production, so I thought about the responsive media, which I will show to you later. So not only just only see, but how to make the interactive media with the students. I will show you later. And next one, you use activities like in my class. I have tutorial class, as I told you that this is a flipped classroom. They study by themselves first, and then they come to tutorial or consultation. So we make activities like debates. We make games for them. We break up into small break-up rooms and then make them brainstorm and think about whatever their critical thinking and the ideas, share with their friends, present it and make a discussion. So make it lively, full with activities. And next one, use mixed platforms. As I told you that in my case, like some students are study online and some students they want to be physically in the class, and this is their right to come as well, because the university didn't have like absolute rule to bar students to come to university. And there are some gap, because like in some class, for example, my student in the morning, they have a lab class, they need to come to the university. So in the afternoon, if it's online class, they're going to be in the campus already. So I open a class for them, for the one who already physically in the campus. But at the same time, I also have to open this class for students who want to study online as well. So in my class, I'm going to have physical class, but at the same time, I'm going to have another camera or Zoom in order to entertain the students who want to study online as well. So I have to, like switch focus in both online class and offline class at the same time. It's quite confusing at the beginning as well. Flipped classroom, I think my colleagues already mentioned. So I'm gonna skip this one. And the next one, which is very important, we have to redefine the objective of the class. So we have to think that, and we have to change our mindset and our students' mindset as well, that in order to study, in order to achieve the goal of the class, it's not only to get the letter grade, it's not only to get A, but to develop our skills, develop our knowledge. So we not only emphasize on the grading or the outcome, but we have to emphasize on the process. So I said that it should be process oriented over than goal oriented. And we have to adjust ourselves, our curriculum on this kind of framework, and we have to share this idea to our students as well. So in order to evaluate, so it's going to be adapt based on this kind of the redefined definition as well. So I, like in my curriculum, in my courses, I change the way that we evaluate our students. Rather than do summative evaluation like midterm exam or final project, but we focus more on formative evaluation. Like every week we have quiz, we have take home homework, we have consultation, and we rather focus on development of the students week by week, rather than we have like final presentation or final examination. Okay, and next one. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the example of my flipped classroom. I have a video recorded clip like this, and luckily that my faculty have our own studio, and we put it like, for example, in my class, I just hang it on Blackboard and also share the QR code for the students like this. So you can try to scan this QR code to see the responsive media, and you will see that in that responsive media, you can slide, you can see the content through smartphone or to tablet while you listen to my clip. So next one, I will show you the example of my clip. Okay, the clip, please. Okay, so this is a clip that I like. One hand, you can look at the responsive media like this. It look like this, and then you can listen to the to listen or watch my explanation of this one. Is about timeline of development of media in Thailand, for example. Okay, next one. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the examples of the outcome that I gave the students. Like this one, I asked them to think about their social media or any kind of media that have effect or influence on their daily life, and made it into the 5 categorization. So this is the assignment, as I told you, that try to integrate the assignment and tasks into their daily life. Okay, next one. And next one, please. Next slide, please. And like as I told you, in terms of their submission, doesn't need to be like a very beautiful or like computer based submission. It can be handwriting, very simple like this. Okay, next one. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I told you, we break the rooms into small rooms and ask them to join like this one. After we have the debate, I ask the students like, do you agree or disagree with this idea presented by your friends? And they show their thumbs up like this to represent that they agree, they like this idea. So, and they look very happy, you know, and I encourage them to make the creative background. So some of them put the cat, put like the computer graphic that they design by themselves, and make them very happy and enjoyable class. Okay, thank you very much for your time. So this is my presentation. And next, I will move to the question, the selected question that I've got. Okay, the question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think
Yep.
Jess, I know you have a lot to share, so you were going very fast. Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
things that you wanted to share with us. Thank you very much. So maybe we will just take the first question that we received from the before the webinar, one of the questions that we received from the participants. So how would curriculum developers ensure both validity and reliability of the revised curriculum and the resulting assessment or assessments?
Well, as I told you that the question is very classic, that how can we make sure that the student will not cheat, will not do plagiarism? The answer is no way. We cannot know that they will do it or not. So trust is sound very ideal. But actually, according to my experience, you know, actually since last semester, I already implemented the online classes already. And to my observation and my experience, none of my students, you know, like they did like they copy or did plagiarism at all. So which is I'm quite lucky. But as I told you that I talked to my students and I try to change their mindset that the goal of the class is not only to get A. So in terms of process and development, I would like to see from you. And I also observe their development through consultation. So in terms of the reliability and validity, so if technically speaking, I try to minimize the score. It, like, for example, instead of put the very big score into midterm exam and final exam, so I made it into a very small, like weekly assignment or weekly assessment, so that I can make sure that I can follow like the students' development each week. So this is what I did for my assessment and my course design.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Maybe what we'll do is we'll go to one of the live questions, Charlton. I think that applies to the three panelists. The question is, how are your new learning activities received by your students? So if you've not done any study or any investigation yet, maybe anecdotally, how do you feel that the new curriculum or activities that you've done, how did your students or how have your students responded to them? So maybe we'll start with you, Jess, and then we move to Abel and Annie.
Well, that's really good question, because I think online learning is new, you know, like for both of our students and ourselves as well. And actually, we can learn a lot from this. Like in my case, like there are some new phenomena that I observe. Surprisingly, in terms of participation, I got better participation from the students from online more than offline. This is like quite a big surprise for me. Like for example, maybe because when we have physical class, some of the students are, you know, like they always sit at the back, you know, and they don't really like put more participation because the physical limitation of the classroom, right? But for online participation, I think if it's flat, it's on one screen, so I can easily pick up, you know, like anyone, and they may be like they feel very equal in terms of participation. This is what I learned from them. And like some of them who came to the class very late, and they always have an excuse that because of traffic jam. Can you imagine Bangkok? Traffic jam is always our excuse. But now they have no excuse. They have to you know, like to attend the class. And I just make it free. Like sometimes they just woke up, they study on their bedroom, on their bed with their pets, you know, like with their cats and dogs, totally fine. This is what I learned from them, that okay, if we give more freedom to them, you know, like they can learn anywhere, anytime, and any moment, and they feel comfortable and they enjoy and they have more engagement. This is what I learned from my students.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Abel?
Well, first of all, I think my students, they took they handled the independent stargazing sessions more or less okay, except that in the case of telescope equipment, well, this is talking about last semester. In the case of telescope equipment, there were certain things that it didn't quite work out because they weren't too familiar with the equipment. And there were also technical difficulties that they weren't well placed to solve at the time. Okay, but the new learning activities for this semester, I'm still in the process of announcing it to the students. So how it works is that I would spend the first 3 weeks talking about the background knowledge, and this week is the week when in fact, tomorrow is when I would let the students on with the I would post the full set of observing activities to the students. But based on what I have posted so far, it seems that the students there hasn't been much negative feedback yet. I think to them, it's really just moving what used to be online into what used to be offline into the full online space. So I think time will tell, but as of now, I think they're still doing okay.
Annie?
Yes, I think we should begin by, I mean, with this question, maybe we should try and begin by asking ourselves, did we enjoy it, or will we actually enjoy online learning activities, online classes? But at UBD, actually, during the pandemic, I mean, when it occurred, the university actually ran a number of surveys throughout the whole university for the students as well, to find out how they feel, what are the challenges they gone through, encountered. Even after the pandemic, we also ran a number of surveys. Personally, I also I also ran a research. I organized a research to find out how they feel about the activities, how they feel about online classes, live, pre-recorded, and at least 150 of them, based on my studies, 150 of the students believe that, they love the online classes, live ones especially, because 76% of them said they get to ask questions in real time, they get feedback. So it's almost like a replicate of the physical class, really.
Okay, thanks, Annie, Jess, and Abel for sharing this, how your new learning activities or the curriculum have been received by your students. From what I am hearing, all the students have been responding well to the activities, as well as the tasks and the lectures, whether synchronous or asynchronous. that you have put up, I mean, in this new semester or even last semester. So we are now at almost at the end of the webinar. We've heard all our three panelists who share with us very concrete examples of how they manage the situation and how they have reshaped either a task, the material, or even the whole curriculum in order to get the students, to achieve the learning outcomes that they anticipated or they intended for the students to learn. So perhaps I could do a very short recap. And the three things that I think come out quite prominently from our panelists today are these. The first one is that throughout this webinar, we would hear from them that no matter what tools, platforms, modes that they have used, in redesigning their curriculum materials or activities, or even assessment, the fundamental principles of design apply. So it's how we design this in achieving the learning outcomes, the intended learning outcomes. That's the first point that's quite significantly articulated by our three panelists today through their examples. The second thing is what Annie talked about earlier, and she talked about attention and engagement, and they matter for retention as well as for learning. And this actually reminds me of a book chapter or two book chapters that my colleagues and I at CDTL are at the moment reading. And the book is called Mind Online, and this book written by Miller. And she says that because we get distracted so easily, our attention span, like Annie said earlier, it's quite short and we get distracted very easily. If we are going to have our lessons online, what we want to watch out for is that we want to minimize distraction so that lessons move from one platform, if you have two platforms, from one to the other one activity seamlessly, so that we don't lose the attention of students. Otherwise, we need to re-engage the students again, and that could be that could be cumbersome as well. So one of the participants actually asked this: do you use two platforms? Do you use two devices? And so on and so forth. That's up to the instructors to design, but I think the key point basically is as seamless as possible so that it doesn't cause as much disruption or distraction to our students, because it may cause retention, it may cause attention issue, and then later on retention as well as learning. The third thing that came out also, maybe the panelists alluded to this, and certainly from the questions that we received before the webinar, as well as in this live session here, the questions and comments, is about accessibility, is about inclusivity, internet connectivity, teacher and student readiness. Are we prepared? Have our teachers prepared? Are our students prepared for this kind of learning? And also just talked about accessibility in countries or in regions where maybe the internet connectivity is not so good. And I remember that Jess, in one of our sessions earlier, not this webinar, but in our other sessions earlier when we were doing dry run, and he mentioned this, and he says that he doesn't want any students to be left behind. That means he wants every student, and that's a concept about inclusivity. He wants all his students to have the opportunity to have that same learning experience. And therefore, in his redesign of his curriculum and materials, he keeps this in mind so that even those who have accessibility issue, connectivity and all that, he tries to build in strategies and ways so that everybody has almost, well, the similar kind of learning experience, so that no one, and he uses this, I think no one or no student is left behind. So these are the three key points that I thought that I would do a short recap about this particular webinar. And the last thing before I turn my time over to Wishong is I'd like to just basically invite our panelists to share just in 10 seconds one takeaway message from each of them. So Abel, would you like to start, please?
Okay. So one takeaway from me when you're redesigning your hands-on activities uh, for online delivery is that think about how the pioneers of your field would have worked without any equipment, without the technology that we have today, and how we can translate that into our students, keeping in mind what we want them to learn. And of course, creativity within constraints. So within our constraints, be as creative as we can. Okay.
Thank you, Abel. As you said earlier, we want our students to be creative, and therefore we ourselves who want to be creative as well in our teaching. I think that's what you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Annie?
Okay, in general, I believe we have all coped very well given the sudden changes in the dynamic environment that we live in. It is understandable, of course, to change or to adopt anything new is definitely difficult. But as we already know, being an educator, student engagement, attention issue, definitely not a new challenge. It's just probably more challenging and demanding given the situation we're in, of course. But on the positive note, with technological advancements, students' engagement and retention indeed, or perhaps can be made more fun, even memorable, in fact, even better than ever. Nevertheless, what's important is how we adapt, how we progress, how we celebrate continuous learning for the education of the future, or as some say, education 4.0. So yes, inshallah, by God's will, by using the right tools, the right learning approaches, maybe even new pedagogies or competence-based framework, along with, of course, a well-implemented strategies, our students will be more engaged in the spirit of student-centered or consistent learner experience. Thank you.
Very well said, Annie. And Jess, over to you.
Well, actually, Dr. Lee, you already mentioned what I thought already, that inclusivity or inclusiveness is my keyword. But another thing that I would like to mention on top of this is, no matter online or offline, teachers are teachers, students are students. What does it mean? Although we now teach online, we don't have any chance to meet them face to face, but we need to care them. They are our students online or offline. Like in my case, actually, I have students with special needs as well. I looked through the question in Q&A. Someone mentioned about children with special needs. I do have student with special needs. He have speaking problem. So I told them that I told this student, a guy, this boy, I told him that if he need a special explanation or something, line me. In Thailand we use line instead of WhatsApp, so you can line me at any time. And he did. Like sometime we talk like half an hour after the class. So I think online, you know, like on another sense, it's also a good platform for us to easily access to students with special needs and special care as well. So I think with our heart, you know, like teachers' heart, no matter online or offline, is still there. And I think that's very precious and crucial. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jess. What we will do is I do see the under the Q&A that there are some questions as well as comments, as well as those that are not the live ones, but those that came in before the webinar, that we are not able to answer all the questions, and we are not able to address all the comments there. Nonetheless, what we hope to do, and this is something that I hope that Abel, Jess, and Annie will help as well, is that we hope to put together perhaps a very short article or blog post, which we hope to put that up on CDTL's teaching connections. And I think Wishong also later on will share whether this particular webinar can be we shared with everyone, the video of this particular webinar. But I just want to underscore one more thing, which is that the third thing that I mentioned right at the beginning of the webinar, which is that this conversation should not end here. This particular group of us and a few hundred of us, we should continue this particular conversation. We share certain similarities, and definitely there are certain differences that we encounter, challenges that are different in different contexts that we are in. Nonetheless, there are many similarities that we share, and it is good. I feel, and I'm sure my panelists feel the same way as well, that we should continue the conversation. And after the seminar, perhaps through our GRO, our colleagues at GRO, we could send you a link, and we could continue, kind of offline here, not live one, but online, offline kind of thing, asynchronous. Some of the thoughts, some of the comments that we have. So I really, really hope that this is the beginning of many, many more conversations that we have. So Wee Shong, I pass the time back to you.
Thank you, Kui Ching. It's very well said that what you have said, it is really the main purpose of us at the Global Relations Office, trying to work with our partners in the ASEAN in order to actually start the conversation so that we can, or the like-minded people, colleagues can work together. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed the webinar as much as I do. And I have picked up some very useful pointers also to adopt into the teaching. So let's now express our most sincere appreciation to the panel. Thank you so much, Annie, Jess, Abel, Kui Ching, for spending your time and sharing your very valuable lessons with us. And I really hope that, as what Kui Ching has said, the conversation start here, not ending. So we would like to, we come to the end, but I would like to share with you the next seminar that we'll be holding on 24th of September. The topic is on teaching and learning in challenging situations. How have we been supported? So this is a very more specialized sort of a webinar. We invite academic practitioners or educational developers in Southeast Asia to join us for a discussion, a dialogue on how we have been doing what we can do in supporting teaching and learning. So till we meet again, I wish you all well, safe and healthy, and thank you very much for all to spending this whole afternoon with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. ขอบคุณครับ